Well, hello and good evening. Welcome to another episode of Progressively Yours Health and Wellness Podcast.
I'm J. Bernard Ma'at Kynes.
And I'm IMANI Ma'at Kynes. And we're glad to have you on board with us this evening. We have a great show as always. And interesting times that we are in right now.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about the whole OJ thing, and it's just sad on so many levels. I mean, we don't have to get into talking about OJ, but it's just sad on so many levels. In terms of him and what he stood for or didn't stand for, and people's reactions to him, and what it means in terms of racism and people's reactions to the case back then and their reactions now. So it's just a little disheartening to see all of what's going on with that. But like I said, I don't want to go into it. It was just on my mind. Hello, Josephine and Monique. It's good to see you.
Welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you take us in with the spiritual opening?
Our pleasure. We are always delighted to have this opportunity. We again have a wonderful show that was initially scheduled for February with our special and outstanding guest tonight.
A returning guest, actually.
Yeah, a returning guest, and who will return again because she is such a brilliant person and personality.
Mm-hmm.
We like to begin by welcoming the divine through our ancestors, and you're welcome to participate. It's very short. I have a short reading from Thich Nhat Hanh, but I like to invite you to, if you're seated and just listening or moving about, if you wish to participate, just relax for this 1 minute. I'd like for you to, if you can, just close your eyes and begin to take in 3 deep and full breaths in and out through your nose, and begin just to relax the muscles in your body. All that has happened today is behind you now, and all that is to come, it will be there upon your arrival. All that you have now is this moment. The tingsha clears the energy so that as we welcome the spirit of the ancestor, we move forward because they've granted us permission to do so. And as we enter into this space and into this place where there is no judgment and where nothing is required, we ask that you open your hearts that you might receive what is intended for you tonight. These words, number 76, from the wisdom of Thich Nhat Hanh, entitled Saints. Saints. Sometimes you encounter people who are so pure, beautiful, and content. They give you the impression that they are divine, that they actually are saints or holy beings. What you perceive in them is their awakened self, their divine inner light, nature. And what they reflect back to you is your own capacity for being awake. It is indeed for the ancestors that we reflect light back to each other because we're created by light, from light, to be light workers in this world in which we live.
Mm-hmm.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Amen.
Amen. And you know what you said about saints, is really what Namaste is all about. The divine in me greets the divine in you. So we're reflecting back to each other all the time.
All the time.
When you see someone, you say, "Wow, you're absolutely beautiful." And it's like, "Oh, you're absolutely beautiful too." It's like, "Thank you, thank you." But it's more than the external beauty. A lot of times, it's the internal beauty that we're resonating with.
Primarily the internal.
Primarily, absolutely. So yeah, so that's a good one to move forward with. So just a couple of announcements before we get into the show. We are so excited. We have been announcing our red light bed therapy that was going to be starting soon in the Precision Health and Wellness Center here in Atlanta, but it's Swanee, Georgia. And we are really excited. We have people signing up to come and try the bed. There is a huge discount for the first visit. We want people to come to the center and experience the bed as well as the other therapies that are available in this amazing center. So reach out to us on, our email is long. We've got to shorten this email. Sankofa, INST for wellness @gmail.com. Toya, if you can put our email address up there for people who want to take advantage of the specials that we have available for you for being early adopters and coming and checking out this red light bed, which has lots and lots and lots of wellness benefits. It basically, we can't make any promises or anything, but it does a lot to help the body to do what it does naturally, to heal itself, basically.
Yeah. It's near infrared. It's not infrared as in heat. And this near infrared and the light red penetrates through the skin down into the cells. It stimulates the mitochondria, which is the workhorse of all of our cells. It works to increase energy, decrease inflammation. It works on healing skin issues like eczema, acne, you name it. And people have just experienced tremendous benefits from lying in this bed for 12 minutes.
Yeah, it's a short time. And a lot of people use the red light bed just to lose weight because it has an impact on your fat cells, kind of release just temporarily, like releasing the fat. We also have a device we call a full body vibration machine. And after you're in the red light bed for 12 minutes, you're on this full body, I call it the jiggle wiggle, because it just shakes everything, but it helps to process the fat out of your system and through your liver and out of your body. So it's a really nice program. We also have a foot detox and some other things that go right in line with this program. So please come and check us out. We are so excited. It's been coming for a couple of months and it's here now. So you definitely want to schedule with us. You can also call to make an appointment. Call 470-861-7266, or do you want to give them another number?
No,
that one's good enough. Right, that and the email are fine. Just reach out to us and we'll get you on the schedule. We already have, and we're working in conjunction with the woman who owns the wellness center, Samantha Chewy. She's been on the show with us, right? Yeah, a while ago. So, and she's
Thank you.
She's sharing her clients with us and our clients with her and the other things that are happening in this center. So anyway, I will leave that because I'll go on and on and on for a while, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to take time from our amazing guest, who Bernard is going to introduce, please.
Yes, it is indeed an honor. Thank you, IMANI, to introduce and present again, as we said, a guest who has appeared on our show before and who shall return because she's just an outstanding psychotherapist, marriage and family therapist. Our amazing guest, Dr. Shatavia Alexander Thomas, is a licensed marriage and family therapist, LMFT. She's an approved clinical supervisor, MFT adjunct faculty, and owner of Dr. Shay Speaks, LLC. She has worked in the mental health field for 20 years and in higher education for 10 years. She specializes in self-care, work-life balance, grief, caregiver well-being, healthy marriages and family relationships, diversity, family businesses, and sports and entertainment families. Mm-hmm. As a consultant, writer, and speaker, Dr. Shay offers services to nonprofits, churches, schools, hospitals, and media outlets. She also holds, and I found this exciting, a beginner mat Pilates teacher certification and has self-published 2 volumes of poetry. Alex Shay Collections, Volume 1, Love, Life, Loss, and A New Life with Alex Shay Collections, Volume 2, Grief, Growth, Grace, and Gratitude. Powerful. She's an Atlanta native, has a BS in psychology, an MS in professional counseling from Georgia State University. She's a doctor of marriage and family therapy at Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. She's married and a mother of a 13-year-old son and probably a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. It is indeed with delight that we introduce and present and bring on stage colleague and friend of the show, Dr. Shay Thomas. Welcome, Dr. Shay.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction and all the wonderful information. I'm honored to be here again.
Yeah, thank you so very, very much.
It's great to have you back. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, so Dr. Shay, question that I like just to start off with traditionally on the show is asking each guest, that's kind of the formal way of introducing you. But before we get into the conversation about healthy relationships, tell the audience, just free associate with us about what who you are when you think about your life from 0 to age 12. What story or 2 comes to mind?
I love it. In true therapist fashion, right? You got me feeling like the client right now. Hold up now.
Guilty as charged.
Yes, I love that because it definitely allows me to tap into different parts of myself that, of course, are still with me near and dear. Early childhood and kind of pre-adolescence for me was really a blessing. I have grown up with the blessing of knowing both sets of grandparents as well as knowing my great-grandparents before they passed away. And so just, with my parents being married for X amount of years and both sets of grandparents. And so from the very beginning, family has always been instilled in me, and faith and having fun. It's a lot of us. And even though I've been kind of introverted since I was a child, I can deal with the loudness, which is probably why I have a lot of interesting friends now. And throughout each stage of my life, I've had that as well. So 0 to 12, I was probably very curious, very balanced. Now, when you get to like 11 and 12, very self-conscious because you're talking about middle school. So I was worried about silly things like why my mama wouldn't let me get a perm, and why I couldn't wear lip gloss like the rest of the girls. And so kind of those beginning stages of trying to discover myself and know who I am in relation to how I was raised. And I think about that now, and probably the reason why I'm babbling so much is because I have a 13-year-old. So he has just completed that 0 to 12. And so I'm thinking of, what parts of him have been instilled from me and my husband, and kind of how he's developing now. So very, very interesting and fruitful initial question.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a beautiful part of your story. And absolutely, you have a 13-year-old, and as you know, in our work, it's going to bring up both conscious and unconscious memories of our own life at that time period. And part of the response to our children is actually a response to how we were related to as well. So interesting dynamics that as your son moves into this early adolescent period.
That's a fun age, definitely. And trying too. So patience, Mom.
Yeah.
I have lots of patience. Where did you grow up, Shay? Oh, you grew up in Atlanta?
I grew up in Atlanta. You know, I'm a product of Atlanta public school system. Interesting fact again about the milestone of 12. And I don't share this a whole lot, but it also, to your point, when things happen in life, you think of things that you hadn't thought of in a while. I had a very abrupt shift in schools because at the age of 12, my parents took me out of the public school in the neighborhood. Now, I went to a school I was not zoned for. This is before they were locking parents up for using somebody else's address. So we used my grandparents' address for me to go to this particular school. And long story short, there was a drive-by shooting in at my middle school, and I was abruptly, kind of taken out of that environment where I had gone to elementary school with a lot of the kids, and rightfully so, my parents were concerned. And long story short, just put in a totally different kind of school from a cultural environment. Went there for 2 years, did 8th and 9th grade at a private school in a different neighborhood. Where it was not as diverse. But then in 10th grade, they allowed me to go back to the zoned high school. So I hadn't thought about that in a while. So to your point, it's interesting how different questions bring up different memories.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
So the topic of our podcast this evening is about relationships. Right. And you're going to talk a little bit about healthy relationships. Tell us about your interest in relationships and how did you get to that point?
Yeah, I think like most people who end up in the mental health field, we either by default have always been that go-to person for our friends and family, or just thinking about our own family dynamics and upbringing. Something happened where it motivated us to kind of understand human behavior and how it plays out in different types of relationships. And so even though I've worn different hats professionally, I've always been very curious and, think a lot about the different aspects of relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but family relationships, relationships between siblings. I am the oldest and I have 2 younger brothers. And so sibling dynamics, my mom is one of 8. My dad was one of 4. And so again, I mentioned cross-generational, intergenerational family dynamics, as well as friendships, and even as it relates to how we communicate with our colleagues and with our supervisors. So different aspects of relationships have always intrigued me, and ended up studying psychology and going through different work experiences and exploring, kind of how to move forward, and ended up becoming a licensed marriage and family therapist. So relationships are near and dear to my heart.
Mm-hmm. And communication is everything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. We all see the world from our own sort of lens and funnel. And what means something to one person could be totally different to another person, and so I think that's, it's just interesting how, I mean, if people can get through the communication maze, if you will, and establish how they're communicating. So tell us some of the issues that communication issues that you deal with on a regular basis?
Yeah.
Couples.
So a lot of clients, again, in my practice and in my role as a mental health professional, I think one of the myths, if I can say this really quickly, about being a licensed marriage and family therapist is that people assume you don't see individuals. And we very much do. However, we're always putting on that hat, that lens of the impact of family dynamics and family upbringing. And so some of the issues related to communication are often just about either people feeling like they're not being heard or respected. Sometimes there's a misalignment of values, and that comes out in terms of decision making and priorities. Again, I mentioned earlier the roles and responsibilities related to parenthood, life planning, and day-to-day responsibilities and dynamics related to couples. And it kind of runs the gamut, but at every stage of a relationship, there's always communication about something, right? Communication about money, communication about household division of labor, communication about holidays, communication about a number of things, about caregiving, communication about a number of things. Do we want almond milk or regular milk? I mean, it can get really petty and it can get really serious, and communication is a part of it all.
Yeah, you're spot on. And I wanted to add and kind of go back a little in the context of what you are discussing, something that I've become interested in a few years ago, but I'm kind of revisiting it now. The communication piece for us, begins. I think one reason. Well, let me back up. One of the reasons I asked that 0 to 12 question, because it's during that period of time where we are taking in from our environment, from our parents, the art of communicating, which is very complex. And so the there are 5 really basic needs that, from an emotional standpoint, that we're going to miss. All of us are going to miss on whether we get all of these or not. Like place and belonging. When we were first born, did our parents actually plan for us? Did they have a place where they celebrated when we were born and brought us home? How were we nurtured? What were inhaled and communicated with in the non-verbal state, the eye contact. How do we feel supported in these early developmental days, and really protected, just our whole sense of self protected. And the communication piece from parent to infant to toddler is very critical, because as you're aware, in those first 5 years, we are internalizing the messages that they are projecting both onto us and into us, as well as the environment. So would you say, in light of the communication concerns that you see and work with couples and families, how these early developmental places in life impact how people communicate, or the lack thereof?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it brings to mind the notion of attachment style, right? In terms of, and I won't put my professor hat on too much, but there's something to be said about the way you were raised and how, do you get the notion at an early age that things are secure, that you're safe, that it's okay to cry, that it's okay to disagree, or do you just sit down and shut up and do what you're told, right? So even that is an example. And we don't always realize that our children, because I'm thinking both ways now, my growing up and now my role as a parent, we don't realize that children are also not only learning from what we say, but what we do. And so whether I think about my own childhood or my role now as a parent, those are some things that come to mind. Am I really touchy-feely and affectionate? What did I get from my early childhood and what am I giving now as a parent as it relates to affection and the communication that goes along with that from a nurturing standpoint? Or does communication of love come from the standpoint of I'm paying the bills and you keeping a roof over your head, and that's how I demonstrate, right? And so from those early ages, we get all those kinds of messages from not only observing the interaction between our parents or siblings, but also the nonverbal actions that go on and how we are almost trained to respond to that and how we model that response behaviorally.
Yeah, I concur. And when you mentioned the nonverbal, I was thinking like the facial expression, the eye or non-eye contact, the tone, intonation in the voice, pitch at the moment that it comes. All of these have a tremendous impact that of the energy that is just transmitted out and impacts. And working with adults, families, and couples or individuals to and I know you see this in your work when you're working with a couple in particular. One of the presenting problem is always we're having communication issues. We're having communication. Okay, and I hear it so much. I'm going, okay, what's your definition of communication?
Right. And communication about what?
Yeah, how does listening come into play here? How are you hearing? What are you hearing? Yeah, that's this is a tough one and a tough area, particularly when people are going through their own individual transitions and not quite aware that they're moving through working to how to best communicate with themselves, and therefore, which is complex within itself, and therefore it's going to be difficult communicating with others where you feel heard and understood.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's important when you're working with a couple or family, not for the sake of like, okay, let's talk about what happened when you were 5, but how do those experiences shape you, and how have maybe you not realized the impact of that on today and how you handle certain situations, whether it be are you more expressive or are you more laid back? The psychological safety piece of it, the physical safety piece of it. Some families come from a household where there was abuse and neglect. And so that absolutely impacts your ideas about what to say, what not to say, how to behave, that kind of thing. And again, as I mentioned, at each stage of life, you're contemplating different things. Couples, how do they communicate and exhibit their discipline preferences with children? And so when, to your point, when people come in, because yes, it is about communication, but there's so many branches and different directions you can go with that. And so really kind of understanding what's all connected to it.
What are some of the things, and you've alluded to some of them, but what are some of the main things that people take for granted in relationships when they're communicating, when they're starting a relationship or extending a relationship? What are some of the things that trip people up because they're making assumptions?
Yeah, well, that's one of them. Making assumptions. I think, if you want to really work on communication, it really starts with a sense of self-awareness. And I think that's a core principle that people miss. You're not going to communicate all that well if you're not even being honest with yourself and having clarity about who you are and what your values are. Again, in addition to all the stuff we mentioned before about safety, also personality factors in. Sometimes there's assumptions about someone's behavior. Maybe they're not detached, maybe they're introverted, right? Maybe they're not loud and obnoxious, maybe they're trying to make friends and they're actually anxious and it's coming out in a different way. And so there, again, whether you're talking about friends or families or in romantic relationships, there's definitely assumptions that are made. We don't think about personality style. We've talked already about the impact of family upbringing, sometimes even the impact of past experience, past relationships, right? So I'm thinking about somebody who's dating or divorced and, socializing and networking and dating again. And so it's like, so now you have a multi-layered experience as it relates to not only who you are and how you were raised, but what happened in your past relationship that kind of impacts the lessons that you've learned and how you've either changed or maybe things you didn't, flags that you noticed, and how you communicate your concerns about them. People don't think about how rigid thinking impacts your communication. And I mentioned values earlier. So if you have certain expectations or certain goals, and those aren't communicated or not very clearly, or you're rigid with that, that's going to come out in some form or fashion with your relationship. And then I talk about this one a lot. Sometimes as it relates to communication, sometimes people talk more about their concerns to other people as opposed to the person they have in the issue with. So especially in this day and age where you have social media and everybody's a relationship expert and there's 50 million books you can read and, oh, this happened on this reality show and this talk show, daytime talk show, and now people are interpreting and surmising how it affects them, and you don't have to read a book, to know what's going on with you and your partner. Maybe the energy should, you reading a book is nice, but the work comes in when you're talking to your partner, as opposed to talking or venting to other people about something that's bothering you, whether it's your romantic partner or a family member. So sometimes communication dynamics are impacted in that way as well.
I think a hindrance to being able to talk openly and risk being vulnerable is I must have a sense of safety that
Yeah.
I can talk about some of the things that I may really want to say, but I need to know that what I want to share with you, that the space is safe for me to talk with you and communicate, that you will listen and work to understand without judging. And we live in such a judgmental society that one of the problems is that people don't feel safe in, I think, sharing even with those that they are the most intimate with. Would you say, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, that's it. That's an excellent point. As I mentioned earlier about psychological safety or emotional safety, that plays a role. And even when you think about, we've talked a lot about families and romantic relationships, a lot of people are struggling with communication as it relates to dynamics in the workplace. And it's nice that now when you think about corporate wellness, people are recognizing the importance of psychological safety. So what does that mean? There's not an atmosphere of hostility. There is, and all the isms, right? Racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism, all those things come out in so many different ways. And so sometimes what happens in communication is the person who doesn't feel safe will shut down. And that leaves an environment where other people are either assuming everything is okay, or just really not aware when it comes out later in different ways. And so the safety piece is very important. And I love the very important word that you used. And is it okay to be vulnerable in this relationship?
So what would you say? Because a lot of people, especially in our community, are so adverse to going to counseling or therapy or however whichever box we put it in, but they're so concerned about going. I think because of the vulnerability issues and having to share the family business. You know, we grew up, you're like, you don't talk about what's going on in the family out there to other people. So tell our listeners some of the benefits, because we really do want people to get this, you know, that it's okay to go to therapy as a couple, as an individual, as a family. Why should
Yeah, I appreciate that because it is about opening yourself up to learning. You mentioned earlier in the conversation that people forget about. I think you said you mentioned active listening, and so therapy provides a platform where there is hopefully an unbiased third party, professionally trained to listen and to reflect and to essentially model what you can do at home with your parents, with your children, with your siblings, with your friends on the workplace. And so it models the type of emotional safety and openness that you work through, because it is work. And quite honestly, some people don't want to go to therapy or counseling because they're not ready to be vulnerable for whatever reason. And they, on some level, understand the work, and they don't know if that's where they are in terms of their commitment in the relationship. Because ultimately, if you're working on the relationship, both people need to be working on, you know, developing the relationship in terms of a safe and healthy manner. And so sometimes a lot of those dynamics come in as well. But yes, going to counseling or therapy is a wonderful opportunity to practice being vulnerable with support and within the context of education and techniques and interventions and empathy and compassion, and even modeling that you don't have to agree. You know, even in my environment, when I'm doing therapy, I invite critique and feedback about my style, about some things that I've said, and I encourage people to practice that both in the room and at home, because again, it's you're retraining your brain and your tongue to do things a little bit differently. And so therapy is a safe place to do that if you have the right fit.
Yeah, you use a word that I just wrote down in terms of brain change. It's a whole paradigm shift, and I think one of the other challenges that why people may not come for consultation, uh, therapy, counseling, whatever term we use, is in the same theme of communication. Most people are not accustomed to being listened to,
Mhm.
and they don't realize how that to be listened to and to be to receive that kind of attentiveness is I think is more frightening than just the idea of the myth about how I'm going to be perceived if I go get counseling. And I've had persons uh, say that. I've said to persons, I said, you're not accustomed to being listened to.
Mhm.
And immediately they would go into tears.
Mhm.
They've gone into tears because listening is probably the art of this whole business of communicating and communication.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, so thank you for saying that about the brain, because we do have the capacity. The brain has capacity to regrow these new neurotransmitters, which we're able then to shift from habits that we've learned and taken into our system very early on, and we can develop new habits as relates to this art of communicating one with the other and with myself. Can can you say a little bit about what some of the myths about communications are?
Yeah, some of the myths are in couples and in family. You said something earlier that definitely gave me a flashback. You don't talk about what happens outside of this house, right? And so sometimes people think that communicating about something is inappropriate or disrespectful. And those feelings come up, right? The feelings of shame, the feeling of anxiety, the feeling of uncertainty. But again, within the right context and the right environment, you can grow to learn how to work through things together. So some of the myths are that nothing is going to change. People are who they are. That in couples, a lot of times couples think that it's unhealthy to fight. And so people assume, oh, we're good. Well, if you are giving people the silent treatment, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're healthy in your relationship. If you're holding back to the point about vulnerability, if you're not openly communicating your feelings, or if you're not heard and validated in that, even if there's like a disagreement or a misalignment with what reality is, you should still have that kind of environment where you can work through it together. So some of them, so that myth relates to I'm not going to communicate with you because it's not worth it, because we're going to fight anyway, or we're not going to agree, we're not going to be on the same page. And so that rigid thinking, that lack of ability to listen for the subtle shift that you need to have the hope that things can ultimately change. Also, the role of acceptance, comes into communicating as well in various relationships. And so sometimes with the myth of nothing is going to change, you could even talk through your thoughts and feelings about that. If nothing is going to change, how do you work on acceptance? How do you even define that? What are some barriers to that? What is something that you're not, in agreement with and not signing up for? Where are some boundaries? That's another important element of communication as it relates to boundaries. So some of those are definitely myths why not only people have concerns about coming to counseling or therapy to get to some of that, but even the myths of like, nah, I might as well just keep it to myself.
I was just thinking a good friend of ours teaches a course on laughter yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking of the role of laughter in a relationship, because we get so heavy and dark about everything, and that, just laughing some things through. For me, it plays a role. Talk about that a little bit. I mean,
Yeah, I see it. It's definitely a strength and a resource and a coping mechanism that many people access. Interestingly, that is something that I talk about in therapy as well, and definitely have noticed in my own family dynamics as well as friendships, in a therapy setting and even in a safe and comfortable relationship. It's always important to assess, am I using humor or laughter as a mask? Right? Because again, if it's not safe to be vulnerable and express other emotions, i.e., embarrassment, sadness, shame, guilt, vulnerability in general, then you kind of have to balance that out. But there is something to be said for the value of being able to appreciate some humor, right? Sometimes if that's even laughing at yourself.
Exactly. I always use the term green acres for us because I'm from New York and he's from Cordele, Georgia.
Yes, that's another communication right? Sometimes not only personality, but regional. There's always Northerners this and Southerners this and men this and women that. And yeah.
All of that. There are times I say, "What word was that you said?" We just laugh about it, which is, as opposed to getting offended or, it's like you and that New York thing. It's like, yeah, I'm a New Yorker.
So Shay, the first time I used the word teenager, it's like there's different slants on teenager. You might have had that look like, what did you say? Is that a word? I said, yeah, that's the word. That's the word. Teenager.
And what does it mean? Would you define it for me, please?
Yeah, then I had to share the story because I was adopted. Adopted child, and so and I grew up, and it was the women who who reared me in just one block in Cordial on 15th Avenue. And so they looked out for each other. And so one day, Mama said to me, she said, "Brian, go there and tell Salita to send me a teenage bit of sugar." Well, you know, at 8, 9, I didn't know what that meant, but I went over and I said, "Miss Ware," Mama said, "give her a teenage bit of sugar." And so she got, I think, a little small cup. And so that's how, I learned what teenager meant. They were the teenager bit, So
he still couldn't define it. It just other than the sugar thing, but it was okay.
Well, you have to read the definition in the context of the story,
right? Yeah, my husband is from California, so it's funny having, now when our son says certain things, he's like, yeah, that's your mama right there. He says certain words, like finna, or
that's another one.
The first time I said Herbie Kirby to him, he was like, "What is that?"
What was that you said?
The Herbie Kirby. It's the big trash thing that you put on the street. It's the Herbie Kirby. That's what we call it.
Okay. That's a new one for me, but I call it the trash bin. But that's okay. But all of that stuff plays in. Like I said, humor is so important.
And I thought real quickly, I thought about something else related to that, especially whether it be in a relationship or in the workplace. Sometimes people make assumptions about intelligence based on how someone communicates. And that is not always the case. So as we were talking, I definitely was thinking about some of those regional things that come up, sometimes some of the racist things that come up related to that. So,
well, it's a good point, because one of the persons that we followed, Dr. Be Serious, and I didn't realize this, but I was impacted by this growing up. They would come down our streets in the summertime, and they would be spraying this pesticide in our community to kill mosquitoes. And we'd be outside playing. We didn't think anything about it, because we just thought, okay, this is going to take out the mosquitoes. But as Dr. B. Serious was saying, that one of the reasons that Southerners have this draw, why don't we talk like New Yorkers? Well, it had to do with the pesticides, and the chemicals in the pesticides in many areas impacted the brain communication region, and therefore it changed the dialect. It wasn't just Southern, Southern and Northern, but it was some of the poison that we inhaled that impacted our brain development.
Interesting. And that's the importance of having an openness to understanding the impact of just a holistic, understanding the ecology of different things. And I love how you referenced that at different points in the conversation, even like from a neurobiological standpoint or a mind, body, spirit standpoint. Sometimes we need to do more of that in our conversations and communications with people. And speaking about communication, another thing sometimes we take for granted is the impact of the tone, as you mentioned, the impact of the time. You want to have a conversation and open up. Is this the time?
Right.
So the time and the tone, the temperament, right? We talk with, some people might interpret this as aggression, and it may result in the other person shutting down. Or do you see it as just passionate, and I want you to take me seriously? If I'm trying to have a serious conversation and somebody else is just, I hear you, so eye contact and, verbal response and acknowledgement. So thinking about those things as well are very relevant for communication.
Yeah. I was also thinking something I heard a long time ago. They said, just because you think it, you don't have to say it.
Yes.
Everything doesn't have to be expressed.
Yeah, have a filter. Understand the importance of having a filter.
Yeah, have a filter, because that's when it gets into being nagging and picking and and none of us are perfect.
Yeah.
So I'm sure.
And don't err on the side of like what some people call toxic positivity either, because what happens in most relationships, how are you? Fine. Well, maybe you need to express if you're embarrassed or exhausted or aggravated or frustrated, or and so even thinking about how we communicate our feelings is important, especially in our romantic relationships, or even in our conversations with friends. How that goes along with that self-awareness piece. Do you know what's going on with you, and then can you accurately communicate when it's the right time? So it also doesn't mean that you have to always be positive, because some people take that to an extreme and they don't know how to be genuine with their feelings, and it comes out in either avoidance or passive aggressiveness.
Yeah. You're talking about how does one grow and become more of an authentic self?
Yeah.
To find a creative balance in which to be able to offer and express oneself in conversation with self and with others. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you help couples and family who are wanting to improve their communications? What's some of your work you do to help them improve? What skills do you offer? Techniques?
Yeah, I love just even sharing some of the information that we talked about today in terms of awareness, self-awareness, awareness of feelings. I ask a lot of questions around how would you assess your communication style? Are you more passive? Are you assertive? Are you passive aggressive? Are you avoidant? One of my, and I have a little cheat sheet here for the descriptions, but one of my favorite family therapy theories related to communication comes from Virginia Satir. And she talked a lot about 5 communication styles. And so you have some people who are like the distractor in terms of their communication style. You have some people, and all of us have elements of all of this from time to time. Some people have a very critical and blaming communication style. Some people are a people pleaser and a yes man or a yes woman, and they kind of placate related to communicating with others. Some people are super reasonable, and if you have a partner who's super in touch with emotions, that could, result in a conflict, because you're thinking logically and the other person just wants you to demonstrate some compassion, that comes out in different ways. But the ultimate ideal way to communicate, you said genuine earlier, Satir would call it congruent. And so you want to kind of hopefully have or develop the kind of relationship where you can be congruent with communicating genuine feelings and thoughts, and that be safe to do so.
Right. Well, I told you it's going to go real fast.
Yes.
We're at the top of the hour, and I have a little piece that I wanted to share, which somebody shared with me yesterday, and it's kind of an evening affirmation, and it's a way to help release everything that has happened, whether good or bad, just kind of releasing the day, so you go to sleep kind of with a clear plate. And so, but before I read this, I just wanted to see if you have any final words that you want to share of encouragement, or, concerning communications in the couples arena.
Yeah, just self-reflect related to the different things that are connected to communication. Try to boost up on your language, so that once you get clarity on the thoughts and feelings, you'll know how to express it. Have patience with yourself and with your partner, with your family, with your children, and understand communication ebbs and flows. Different things happen in families where life changes result in different styles of communication. Know that we communicate with our bodies. And so, how are you paying attention to your nonverbals? We communicate with our presence, we communicate with our absence, and with our exclusion. And so, what messages are you sending, and what messages do you want to send, and what kind of needs to be validated and kind of work through together for the sake of your own health and well-being and that of the relationship.
We were muted. Thank you so much for those words of wisdom. And I'm going to close us out with this little positive evening affirmation. The author is unknown, so I have no idea who wrote this originally, but it was sent to me and I really like it. So here it goes. I now release and clear all negative energy. I'm calling back all my energy to me. So I am experiencing more confidence, more peace, more joy, more love right now. Show me the truth in my dreams. Guide me always, when I am awake and when I am asleep. Before I close my eyes, I open my ear to the divine creator, my higher self, and the spirit of peace. I now release all negative energy that I have absorbed from people I've interacted with today and places I have visited. I release them all now. I release them fully and I release them to be cleared. And I now replace it with love, light, clarity, peace, joy, and purpose. And so it is, and so it shall be. Ashe. Namaste. And amen.
Amen.
Thank you, viewers, for joining us. We appreciate all of you. Peace and blessings. See you next week. Same time, same place.
Ashe. Namaste.
All right.